To begin with, it must be noted that the boxing gloves were tightly laced. Furthermore, from a technical standpoint, the stance was absolutely impeccable. And believe it or not, Queen Elizabeth II was in fact fully ready to do battle with the heavyweight champion of the world. What actually transpired during the subsequent 10 minutes within the walls of Buckingham Palace remained, for all intents and purposes, the most carefully guarded secret of the royal family for a period spanning 40 years. This remained the case until, quite unexpectedly, a single photograph changed everything that we thought we knew about the Queen, Muhammad Ali, and ultimately, the true meaning of the concept of a champion. If, by any chance, this incredible story of unexpected courage and mutual respect has touched you, please do not hesitate to subscribe in order to learn more about the unknown moments of meetings between history's most fascinating figures. Additionally, feel free to leave a comment regarding the most surprising thing you have ever learned about a person whom you have admired. As the story goes, the crystal chandelier was casting dancing shadows across the blue drawing room of Buckingham Palace, all while Queen Elizabeth II was painstakingly preparing for a meeting with one of the most famous men on earth. It was, as history records, the 15th of November in the year 1975, and the 49-year-old monarch had, after some consideration, agreed to present Muhammad Ali with the special Commonwealth Sports Award during a private ceremony which, under normal circumstances, would not have lasted more than 30 minutes. The Queen, looking undeniably elegant in a pale blue dress adorned with her grandmother's diamond brooch, had, over the years, conducted hundreds of similar ceremonies. However, it must be said that something about this particular meeting felt distinctly different from the very moment of its initial proposal. It is worth remembering that Muhammad Ali, who was 33 years old at the time, was situated at the absolute peak of his powers and fame. It is important to remember that, just a few months prior to this event, he had defeated Joe Frazier in the brutal bout known as the Thriller in Manila, thereby cementing his status not merely as the heavyweight champion of the world, but quite possibly as the most recognizable human being on the planet. Furthermore, his unique combination of athletic genius, poetic braggadocio, and controversial political stance had, in effect, made him a figure who transcended far beyond the realm of sports. He was, without a doubt, a man who commanded attention wherever he appeared, effectively filling the space even before he opened his mouth. The invitation to Buckingham Palace had arrived through official diplomatic channels, largely because the British government was eager to honor an athlete whose global influence extended far beyond the boundaries of the boxing ring. As it happened, Ali had spent the morning sightseeing in London, visiting young boxers at a local gym, and, as one might expect, charming crowds wherever he went. His magnetic personality, naturally, attracted people from all walks of life who simply wanted to be in the presence of greatness. When Ali finally entered the blue drawing room, accompanied by his small entourage, it became immediately apparent to the Queen that he carried himself with the absolute confidence of a man who, truth be told, had never met a challenge he could not overcome. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his bow tie was tied with precision, and moreover, on his famous face played the slight smile of a man who was entirely comfortable being the most important person in any room he entered. The Queen, for her part, had prepared thoroughly for this meeting, studying Ali's background and achievements, realizing, quite correctly, that she was about to meet not just an athlete, but a cultural phenomenon whose influence reached every corner of the globe. She had watched recordings of his fights, read transcripts of his interviews, and, surprisingly, found herself genuinely intrigued by the man behind the legend. The formal ceremony proceeded smoothly enough. Ali accepted the award with gratitude, and the Queen, as dictated by custom, spoke appropriate words of congratulation on his achievements in the ring. Protocol, of course, demanded a certain distance and formality. However, both participants found themselves unusually engaged in the meeting, feeling perhaps that there was something more to explore in this unexpected encounter between two people whose lives took place in completely different spheres of power and influence. However, when the ceremony concluded and the small audience of palace officials and photographers began to disperse, the Queen, to everyone's surprise, made an unexpected request that effectively changed the course of the entire evening. "Mr. Ali," she said, with her voice carrying the authority inherent to more than 20 years on the throne, "I am curious if you would be so kind if you could stay for a few more minutes. I am interested to learn about the sport that has made you so famous." Ali's eyebrows raised slightly in surprise, but his smile widened as he saw an opportunity to discuss his favorite topic with one of the most influential people in the world. The Queen, with a slight nod, dismissed her entourage, leaving only herself, Ali, and a single guard in the luxurious room. What followed, as it turned out, was a conversation that began formally, but quickly became surprisingly personal, as two people whose lives were lived under constant public scrutiny found common ground in the unique pressure they both experienced. Ali spoke eloquently about boxing as a physical confrontation and a mental chess match, while the Queen, in turn, shared her thoughts on the discipline required to execute one's duties flawlessly under intense pressure. "Your Majesty," said Ali, entering his characteristic rhythm of playful boasting, "I have fought all the great heavyweights of the world, and there is not a single man on earth who can defeat Muhammad Ali. I am the greatest boxer who ever lived, the prettiest fighter you have ever seen." His words carried the familiar confidence that had made him famous, but, it should be noted, they were spoken with a warmth and charm that made them more entertainment than arrogance. The Queen listened with the polite attention she had honed over decades of diplomatic meetings, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she was more amused than impressed by Ali's claims. When he finished his impromptu speech, she leaned slightly forward in her chair and asked a question that, quite frankly, shocked everyone present. "Really, Mr. Ali, are you absolutely certain that no one can challenge you?" Ali laughed, presumably assuming that the Queen was simply playing along with him in a verbal spar. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, I can beat anyone in this room, anyone in this palace, anyone in this entire country. I am the undisputed, undefeated, prettiest champion of the world." He gestured broadly as he spoke, his confidence absolutely unshakable. However, what happened next was discussed in hushed whispers among the palace staff for the rest of their careers. Queen Elizabeth II slowly stood up, smoothed her dress with deliberate care, and looking Muhammad Ali straight in the eye, uttered words that, without a doubt, no one in that room would ever forget. "In that case, Mr. Ali, perhaps you would like to try your hand against me." The silence that followed was so complete that the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece seemed deafeningly loud. Ali's mouth literally fell open, his usual quick wit temporarily failing him as he tried to comprehend what the Queen of England had just proposed. The guard shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether he was witnessing the beginning of an international incident or an elaborate royal joke. "Your Majesty," muttered Ali, his composure shaken, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, "I simply cannot. I mean, it would be... You are the Queen of England." But even as he objected, something in Elizabeth's unflappable gaze told him that she was entirely serious about her unexpected challenge. Without saying another word, the Queen walked over to an antique gun cabinet in the corner of the room, and with great purpose, opened its ornate doors. Inside, to Ali's absolute and total amazement, there was, quite unexpectedly, a full set of boxing equipment. Gloves, wraps, protective gear, and even a pair of small boxing shoes that appeared to be exactly her size. As she began to remove the gear, Ali noticed that everything was of the highest quality, clearly expensive, and bore undeniable signs of regular use. "Your Majesty," said Ali, with sincere bewilderment ringing in his voice, "where did all this come from?" The Queen smiled, beginning to wrap her hands with practiced efficiency, her movements demonstrating a familiarity with the equipment that suggested extensive previous experience. "Mr. Ali, did you really believe that the sovereign of the United Kingdom would challenge the heavyweight champion of the world without proper preparation?" Her voice sounded with a note of mischief that Ali had never heard from any head of state. "As a matter of fact, I have been taking private boxing lessons for the last 18 months. My instructor is, interestingly enough, a former British Army boxing champion who has sworn an oath of absolute secrecy. I thought, you see, that it might prove useful to understand something about the sport that captivates so many of my subjects." She paused, noting with evident satisfaction the shocked expression on Ali's face. Sergeant Major William Harrison served with distinction in the Welsh Guards and won 3 Army boxing championships before retiring. He was recommended to me by my private secretary, who thought I might benefit from understanding the strategic and mental aspects of boxing. Physical fitness was intended to be secondary, but surprisingly, I found that I quite enjoy the discipline and technique involved. This revelation by the Queen explained her confident demeanor and the polished manner in which she approached the boxing equipment. What had started as intellectual curiosity about the sport had over time evolved into genuine skill and passion under the guidance of one of Britain's best former military boxers. As the Queen laced up the gloves with movements that demonstrated clear competence, Ali found himself in the surreal position of watching the most formal woman in the world prepare for physical combat. She removed her jewelry and put up her hair, transforming from a regal monarch into a determined athlete in a matter of minutes. When she turned to face him, her stance was impeccable, and in her eyes burned the focused intensity of a person who had learned to take this sport seriously. "Your Majesty," said Ali, shaking his head in disbelief, while simultaneously beginning to wrap his own hands, "this is, without a doubt, the craziest thing that has ever happened to me, and I once fought a bear at a fair." The Queen's laughter was sincere and enthusiastic. It was the sound of a person who was thoroughly enjoying the most unusual evening of her royal career. What followed was, in all honesty, something incomparable in either the history of boxing or the history of the monarchy. For the next 20 minutes, the Queen of England and the heavyweight champion of the world engaged in what can only be described as the gentlest, most respectful sparring match that has ever been conducted. Ali, initially holding back to a ridiculous degree, was gradually forced to take the Queen more seriously, as she demonstrated genuine defensive skills and threw surprisingly sharp jabs that actually required his attention. The spectacle of the monarch of 16 Commonwealth realms throwing boxing combinations in the blue drawing room of Buckingham Palace was so surreal that the guard began to question his own sanity. Nevertheless, it must be stated that there was nothing comical about the Queen's technique or dedication. Her movements were crisp, purposeful, and demonstrated the results of months of serious training under expert guidance. The Queen, despite her lack of height and power, moved with the careful precision of a person who is well taught and has trained diligently. Her footwork was solid, her defense was properly maintained, and she displayed a boxing instinct for timing and distance that impressed Ali more with every passing minute. She understood concepts such as cutting off the ring, defensive posture, and counterattacks, which most casual observers of boxing never managed to grasp. Her combinations were simple, but technically correct, and she displayed remarkable composure under the pressure of sparring with the world's most famous athlete. She never intended to hurt the heavyweight, but she was clearly capable of making him work harder than he expected. And furthermore, her defensive skills meant that Ali had to demonstrate real technique rather than just going through the motions. "Your Majesty," said Ali during a brief break, his respect evident in his voice, "you have real skills. Who taught you to move like that?" The Queen's smile was radiant as she wiped sweat from her brow with a towel bearing the royal monogram. "As I mentioned, a former military boxing champion," she replied. "But I also studied films of your fights, Mr. Ali, I wanted to understand how the greatest boxer of our time approached his craft. I must say, first-hand experience gives me tremendous respect for both your skill and the courage of your opponent. As their unlikely sparring session continued, something beautiful began to happen between these two remarkable people. The formal distance that naturally existed between the monarch and her guest melted away, replaced by the mutual respect that develops between athletes who recognize genuine ability in one another. Ali found himself genuinely coaching the Queen, offering technical advice and encouragement, while she responded with the focused attention of a dedicated student. The session reached its emotional peak when Ali, after parrying a particularly well-timed combination from the Queen, completely stopped sparring and removed his gloves. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice full of a sincerity that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. "I have to tell you something. You are a true champion, not because you know how to box, although you are better than you should be, but because you had the courage to try something completely outside your world to better understand your people." He paused, his usual eloquent flow of words momentarily broken by genuine emotion. "I fought Joe Frazier 3 times, went 15 rounds with Ken Norton, and faced every heavyweight champion of the world for the last decade. But what you did just now required more courage than all of that. You risked looking foolish, you risked your dignity, you risked everything to better understand something. That is what real champions do. They are willing to step out of their comfort zone for something greater than themselves." The Queen removed her gloves and extended her hand to Ali, not in the formal gesture of royal protocol, but in the simple handshake of one athlete acknowledging another. "Mr. Ali," she said, "I believe the honor is mine. You have shown me that true champions are defined not only by victories, but by their willingness to treat every opponent with respect and dignity." What neither of them knew, however, was that the palace guard, touched by what he was seeing, had quietly photographed several moments of their sparring, using a small camera that was always carried for documentation purposes. These images remained locked in the royal archives for the next 40 years, known only to a handful of the most trusted palace servants who had sworn absolute secrecy about the evening when their queen boxed with Muhammad Ali. The photographs captured moments of pure joy and determination on both faces. The queen's focused attention as she threw combinations, Ali's genuine surprise and admiration as he watched her technique, as well as the warm handshake and laughter they exchanged at the end of their unlikely meeting. Years later, when these images were finally discovered, royal historians noted that they showed the queen more relaxed and genuinely happy than in virtually any other photographs of her long reign. At the same time, Ali looked more humble and respectful than at any other documented moment of his famously confident career. As it turns out, the friendship that began that evening lasted for the rest of Ali's life, eventually evolving into one of the most unlikely and meaningful relationships in both of their remarkable careers. It is a well-known fact that the Queen and the champion maintained a regular correspondence. Elizabeth followed Ali's career with sincere interest, while Ali sent her updates on his life and thoughts. Their letters, written in their own hands, revealed two people who found in each other a rare understanding of the unique pressure and responsibility associated with their extraordinary positions in the world. The Queen often wrote about the difficulties of maintaining dignity under constant scrutiny. Meanwhile, Ali shared his thoughts on using fame as a platform for social change and personal growth. Whenever Ali came to London, he was always welcomed at the palace for private dinners where they could speak freely on topics ranging from religion and politics to family and the burden of public life. When the Queen traveled to the United States, she made it a point to meet with Ali whenever possible, often arranging informal meetings that allowed them to maintain their friendship away from the public eye and diplomatic protocol. Their correspondence revealed a deep mutual respect that transcended their very different views and beliefs. The Queen admired Ali's willingness to sacrifice his career for his principles. Ali, on the other hand, was impressed by the Queen's devotion to duty, despite the personal costs. They shared stories about the loneliness of leadership, the difficulty of making decisions that affect millions of people, and the challenge of maintaining authenticity while living under constant public observation. The Queen's letters often included thoughtful questions about Ali's spiritual journey and his views on social justice, while Ali's replies demonstrated a philosophical depth that few outside his inner circle ever saw. In the year 1984, when Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, the Queen was, unsurprisingly, one of the first to extend personal support and offers of help. She arranged for Ali to receive treatment from the best neurologists in Europe and ensured that his medical expenses were covered through a discreet royal trust fund. As Ali's condition deteriorated in subsequent years, the Queen often called simply to let him know she was thinking of him. Conversations that meant more to the struggling champion than any of his sporting achievements. The secret of their sparring might have died with them, had it not been for the discovery of these photographs during the organization of the Royal Archives in 2015. When the images were found, they caused an international sensation, revealing a side of Queen Elizabeth that the world had never seen, and adding a deeply human dimension to both her legacy and Ali's. The photographs captured moments of pure joy and mutual respect between two people who could not have been more different in background, race, religion, or life experience, but who found common ground in their shared understanding of what it means to be a champion. They proved that greatness lies not in titles or victories, but in the courage to step out of one's comfort zone and the wisdom to treat every person with dignity and respect. Today, it is fitting that these photographs hang in both Buckingham Palace and the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, serving as a reminder that the most important battles are often fought not for victory, but for understanding. Ultimately, the evening when Queen Elizabeth challenged Muhammad Ali to a boxing match became legendary, not because of who won or lost, but fundamentally because it showed the world that true champions recognize greatness in others, regardless of where they find it. The Queen, who knew how to box, and the champion who could teach, became symbols of how people from completely different worlds can find a connection through mutual respect and shared courage. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most meaningful victories happen when we choose to look beyond our differences and recognize the champion that exists within everyone.